Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I provide online divorce mediation and valuation services in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we will discuss preserving a family business when the owners divorce with Bob Boyd. He's a divorce lawyer in Atlanta. He's also the co-founder of Boyd, Collar, Nolen, Tuggle, and Roddenbery, and is a leader in family law who has received recognition from his colleagues across Georgia and the nation for his work in high net worth divorce litigation and contested custody cases. I think that one thing that you talked about is tracing, right? Tracing of assets. And I don't think people totally understand that, but this kind of leads into it, and maybe you can explain it. If the business if one person believes, because that's really what it is, that the business could be a separate asset, it was created before the marriage, or it follows in the path of being separate. How do you deal with separate property in Georgia in this situation?
Great question. And probably, I would argue, the most complicated topic that we deal with today in this analysis. First, ideally, if you have a viable business and you decide to get married, please get yourself a prenup. That would be rule number one. That's what I tell folks. I particularly tell folks who get divorced and I think are high candidates to get remarried at some point in the future, get a prenup, because that way at least you can establish a baseline that I'm bringing this asset in, it's mine, it has a value when we get married, and so I've at least got that going for me. Now, that's when the hard stuff comes in, because you bring the business in, you keep working in the business. Maybe your spouse works in it, maybe he or she doesn't. But hopefully, if things go right, that business is going to appreciate. And that's when we get into this whole analysis of active appreciation versus passive appreciation. Mm-hmm. And that's when you have the battling experts. That's when nobody's going to agree to hire a neutral expert. If you have a situation of a pre-existing business, appreciation during a marriage, we're getting divorced, then it's going to be the battle of experts as to what is active and what is passive.
Right. Well, and I think that, we do things a little differently in that if, sometimes it is what it is, right? Sometimes I think I've seen pretty significant financial planning in high net worth divorces. If you have family wealth that goes back a couple generations, that's usually the best prepared to get divorced or to get married and then divorced. It's not a good, I know it's hard for people to kind of plan ahead with a prenup, but I will say that there's ways to protect your separate assets.
Sure.
And those are the things you need to focus on.
A good prenup is basically, if you come in with a viable business and the prenup, at least I would say most of the ones that I prepare, there are a few exceptions, and I've actually got one right now that we're working on that's going to be an exception. Most of them are going to provide, I get this business, I get any appreciation of whatever nature occurs, active or passive. It doesn't matter whether my new spouse works in the business is going to be mine. Whatever it's worth when we get divorced, however it's appreciated, it's all mine. That's what most prenups are going to say. Now, I think I have to footnote that with something I've got going on right now, and it's not all that unusual, where you get somebody in a second marriage and they've got a spouse who they realize they might have not quite made some good decisions with their first spouse. They want to try to do better. And so then they want to work up a mechanism where the efforts that I put in during the marriage to this pre-existing business somehow count toward the marital pot. That I don't do a lot of that, but as I said, I'm doing one right now. like that. And that's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It is complicated, but you are right. If you want to protect it, we can do that if you give us enough planning. If we don't have that opportunity, if we just come in with the business and the prenup's not properly drafted, or you don't have a prenup, then we're going to get into this active passive analysis. Can't help it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it because it typically, and again, every state is different. It's going to be very important for anybody who's listening. If you are in a particular state, that's why you have to reach out to people in that state that can operate in that state. But in general, like in the state of Missouri, income on separate assets is marital, right? So earnings of the business, if they stay in or stay out, there's some issues there. But like all of these things you have to consider. But appreciation, so you have the separate business that comes in and it grows over time, right? And it is still separate. And the marital and the separate contribution is how much did you as an individual contribute to it increasing in value, and how much did you sit back and it just increased in value. Like sometimes we'll have a person that owns a company, but maybe they're just the vice president. Maybe it's a huge family business, right? And the business increased over time, but like they just kind of count things, like they just do inventory, they just do something, but they're owners as well. So like all of those have to be taken into account, right?
6 months before COVID, I spent 8 trial days trying that very issue. It was a big family business, and the client on the other side was a vice president. And we argued for days with multiple experts about what was active, that is, what did his efforts do versus passive. He's sitting in an office while this other side of the business is the one really causing the profits to go up. So it gets very complicated, especially without a prenup.